Perfect.
Oh, hello everybody, and welcome to my channel. I'm so excited to be joined today by a very, very special man, Dr. Dan Seda, who is now my instant friend. I've been meeting a lot of wonderful people these days, and I'm over the moon excited about it because the connections seem to be divinely orchestrated, and I think that that's just so beautiful. And so I want to introduce those of you that don't know Dr. Dan Seda. Him and I have just become friends recently. So I was a speaker at the Galactic Informers Conference in Orlando back in October of this year. And I didn't know, but Dr. Dan was in the audience, and we spoke. We were connected by one of my mentors who works with the Aramis school that I've created, Mark Savas, I'm going to be having him on my channel next week. So I'm really excited. He's a wonderful, wonderful human being. And they connected, and then he connected us together. And unbeknownst to me, we have all of these synchronistic characteristics about our personality, our work, so many things. And so I wanted to invite Dan on today to talk about himself and his amazing books and just who he is and his journey. So welcome, Dan. I want to give you a chance to say hi, and then I'll read your bio real quick. But I don't want to talk for 5 minutes.
No worries. Thank you so much. And it really is a pleasure to be here. So thank you so much, Sherri. So hey
Yeah.
guys, how are you? Good to see you. My name is Dr. Dan Seda, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Sherri's got in store today.
Yeah. Well, I don't normally read bios, but yours is absolutely just beautifully written, and I'm like, I can't recreate this one. So I'm going to go ahead and read it today. So I'm going to go ahead and start. So Dr. Dan Seda is an accomplished multidisciplinary performer, psychic medium. I don't know if I'm saying this right. Is it Ahorai or
Ahorai, maybe like roll the R a little bit. Ahorai. Yeah, that's
Ahorai?
what
Okay. Starseed or Arcturian Envoy with Andromedan connections, author of several publications on cosmic disclosure and spiritual ascension. His most recent book, Chronicles of an Arcturian Envoy, A Starseed's Journey into the Great Awakening, and its sequel, so exciting, which is The Messages of Hope for a New Generation, are both available on Amazon, which I will put below so you guys can get the links to that. He also has a memoir called Waiting for Life, a cancer survivor's story of death, humor, and love, also on Amazon. We'll talk about that as well. You also, Dan, have a successful life coaching business called Multi-Viewing, which I think is such an incredible name. That's just perfect. And he channels his Arcturian guides, and it's a 5-month human development program. So we'll talk about that as well, and how we're going to utilize or integrate and collaborate with the children with Aramis, using his holistic approach. He's also a childhood cancer survivor, near-death experiencer, and he's had an out-of-body experience during a car accident when he was 25. I want to talk about that as well. He remains in contact with his Arcturian guides through dreams, visitations, telepathic, and astral communications. He has a PhD in transpersonal psychology, and he has a master's in public administration and a bachelor's in communication. So, wow, so much, so much to say, Dr. Dan. I love it. Oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about today, but I think a good place to start is the title of your book, the trilogy. You're working on the third. Is that correct? The
Good
third?
question. That should be started probably in a few weeks. I have two different collaborations that I'm probably going to be working on first, so we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, you use the word Arcturian envoy several times, so I wanted to start with that, and I want to explain to the audience what you mean when you say an Arcturian envoy, because I think it's a really interesting way to use the word envoy in your title.
Yeah, actually, it makes actually total sense if you think about it. So, I know that your academy, we do talk about the Starseed Academy here in the second book, but at your school, you guys are working with starseeds and helping them realize, who they are and how they can be a benefit to the world and in society in the future. So the envoy concept kind of comes from, I guess you could say, like the military, where the envoys are kind of like the ones on the ground, dealing with a lot of stuff that can be a little tumultuous and muddy and dirty. And I've sort of always felt that way. I've always felt like, I'm definitely not going to be getting out of this lifetime unscathed. So I sort of took upon the concept of envoy. And then I had several communications with my guides, and I had different, I guess you could call it somatic experiences, where I felt myself kind of in a stasis situation. And I allude to it in the book. A lot of my lived experiences, oddly enough, I put in these fictional books. So you'll be able to learn a lot about me and my story kind of through the wonderful characters in these books. But yeah, that hopefully that answers the question, the envoy experience. It can be perceived as, ground worker here on Terra, as well as someone who's perhaps splitting consciousness in their more original body, if that's the case, on another planet.
I find that topic or that notion very fascinating. And a lot of the work that I do, I work with children, but I also work with adults, and I worked with adults for years before I was invited to work with children, and that's kind of how I navigated to children. I was invited. It wasn't like I want to work with children. It was the parents that asked me, "Can you work with my child?" And I said, "Sure." And then suddenly it was many children. But before, I worked with a lot of adults, and I still do. And a lot of what I discover, because you and I both are similar in our intuitive readings with our clients, I connect to the higher self of the person and find out what their soul's purpose is in this particular timeline. But when we find out, as many of them and most of us really are living another reality at the same time. And there's lots of different ways you can explain that. And some people call that parallel reality. Some are just say it's multidimensional beings having multidimensional experiences that overlap. I mean, there's lots of different ways, but I found that fascinating because I thought, to me, years ago when I started getting that information in my sessions, it was a little overwhelming to me to try to put that into a human context, right? Like trying to understand or what that means, like how does that work? But now all these years later, I'm like, yeah, Dr. Dan, he's living another life, maybe in stasis somewhere else, no biggie, like it's like I'm not fazed by it anymore. But there was a time where I was like, wow, this is like really weird. But I think that's wonderful. So you connect to the Arcturians and the Andromedans. Can you explain kind of the why both?
Yeah, good question. So my main guide, I sort of refer to him as, and remember, it's a little hard to explain this in human terms. So, I do my best to try to, use the correct verbiage for us to understand more advanced concepts or higher dimensional planes of existence or densities. But in general, my guide really came to the forefront, actually much more visually, probably the last few years. While I was in my doctoral program in transpersonal psychology, we didn't talk too much about ET stuff, with all due respect. It was very, we tried to stick as much as we could to, the neuroscience, cognitive, faculties, and how that could play a role in people's experiences of paranormal or psi phenomena. But then again, learning how to not pathologize these individuals or slap them with diagnoses. I did not go the clinical route. I went much more into the research route. So I was able to research things like reincarnation and mediumship and everything. And I came to realize how similar a lot of my abilities were and how similar my communications were with my guides. In the very beginning, I couldn't quite see them per se with my third eye. It was much more of a feeling of kind of like me being in a very busy room and trying to decipher which communications I was working on. Now, as a medium, but retroactively looking at those experiences back then, several years ago, I was definitely tapping into more of like the fourth density sort of transitory
Mhm.
realm where those communications are a little bit easier for people here on Terra. And I was grappling with deceased loved ones, my deceased loved ones in my family. I have several stories about me and my grandpa and my grandma, and learning much more about them after their passing and having a lot of validation after speaking to my bio family about certain things that occurred. So anyways, I went off topic, but hopefully that makes sense. Oh, the Andromedans, sorry. So the Arcturians do help me more on kind of more of an intellectual level, where if I have to find a way to describe a very challenging concept, like meta concept, in human terms. They really help me kind of siphon and utilize my critical faculties in order to do that. Now, with all due respect, this first Chronicles book was written in 20 days, which is crazy. It was 20 chapters in 20 days. And this one here was 40 days. This was the second book. Perhaps I just took a little bit more time to figure things out, but everything has been working in perfect timing. And we can definitely talk about some synchronicities a bit later, but lest I forget about the Andromedans. So the Andromedans for me really do help me understand and feel appropriately my emotions, and learn how do I say, love beyond the what's seemingly in front of our face, being able to see the love beyond conflict, the love beyond something. And that I've been able to really, it's helped me a lot in my marriage, but many other things as well. And so I kind of work with them in tandem, but my main guide is Arcturian, or so he seems and looks like. So
And what does he look like?
yeah, so actually, I did describe him a little bit earlier in a different interview, but he looks, oddly enough, very similar to me. No hair, but also a little bit more I don't want to say a square, but more of like an oval sort of shape, smaller chin, a little bit smaller lips and stuff, a little bit smaller nose, very much larger eyes, but kind of those piercing, sagacious eyes, I guess you could say, eyes that um, are so wise beyond anything we can fathom. And I did a full regression with a wonderful man, Daniel Rekshan, who's a good friend. Wonderful quantum healing hypnosis therapy. I think people know what that is. I
Yeah.
sort of butchered the term, but I remember in our session, my guide was just sitting right there the whole time. He didn't even move, and he took me through certain events and certain scenes, I guess you could say, but he was absolutely there the whole time. So that does speak to the validity of my experience, because you can't make up something that you can feel presently right next to you the whole time. You know what I mean? That's a little weird. So I tend to look at things sort of like from a scientific and or a psychological standpoint. So I try to help people see that there really is validity in these types of claims if you know what to look for. If you're able to express yourself in a manner that says, no, I literally felt this person as if there was another person standing here. There was really no movement, and if there was, it was slow, it was fast, it was whatever. How does that work? And that's very different from how our imagination works, where imagination is sort of like fleeting thoughts in and out, kind of that type of stuff. When you get communication that is very um, uh, vital, and there's a sense of urgency, or there's a sense of love and larger existential wisdom involved, and it's almost like prose, like perfect prose, you're sort of tapping into something that is, I think, extra worldly. So
Yeah. And thank you for that explanation. And as I get lost in your words and I allow myself to relax, I can actually see your Andromedan uh form. It merges with you. And I was tripping me out for a second because I was like, whoa, I could see it. And what I was getting was that um I believe that you have an Andromedan origin, but likely an Arcturian connection as well. And what I'm getting is that the Andromedan part of you is more suited to who you are today, your character, your characteristics, your personality, where the Arcturian guide is here to center and balance you and to keep you more focused and not to get lost in translation. And it's interesting that I got that so quickly because that's how downloads work. I mean, it's instantaneous, right? But from my experience with Arcturians, and I have a lot of clients no, sorry, false information. I have a few clients of all that are the Arcturians, the smallest amount, but they're the most clear communicators.
Mm.
And my experience with those clients that have an Arcturian connection, some of which I have that become regular. So I've had a honor of being able to communicate with these Arcturians many times. They are very matter of fact. Half the time I can't understand, like honestly, and I'm not dumb, but like I can't understand like goes way over my head. I have to oftentimes tell them, can you explain that to me in a different way? I'm sorry. They're very loving and kind and genuine, but they're, you can almost feel like uncomfortable, like you're around somebody like really like full of wisdom and like old soul, and you're kind of like geeking out, so you got to
Yep.
pull yourself together. But when I have had experience with the Andromedans, like I feel like I could just hang with them, and you know what I mean? And they're really friendly and almost exactly how I feel towards you. So as you're talking to me, all of this information is coming towards me, and it's so beautiful.
It's perfect. Thank you so much for that, because almost verbatim, that's exactly what Vivian Chauvet told me. And I know you didn't see that, so thank you. That's brilliant.
I
Yeah.
love Vivian. One
Yeah.
day her and I will connect. Um, and I just want to point out a synchronicity. When you and I were speaking on the phone a couple weeks after the conference, when I wrote my first book, Intuitive Transformation Evolution, it was one of those things where my guides were like, write this book, right? And I was like, oh, I didn't want to write. I'm not a writer, so I didn't feel comfortable putting a book out, and they said, just write it. And I think I channeled most of it because some of it I read and I'm like, did I say that?
Totally
But
get it.
the funny thing is that I wrote it in, I don't know about 21 days or the days, but it took me 3 weeks. And you and I talked about that. And I'm like, me too. And then the second one took me twice as long. And you were saying you too. And it's
Yep.
crazy because I needed to take more time with the second one. And you said the same thing. And so like these synchronicities between you and I were just crazy when we were speaking over the phone. I just want to mention that because I think that it's important, not so everyone can, be inside of our inside joke here, but rather connect with the notion of this is happening with people all over the world that are connecting, feeling like I know, like I feel like I know you,
Mm.
like I love this person. I just met them. This is crazy. It's happening to everybody I know. And
Mm.
whether they're meeting them through Zoom or long distance, or suddenly someone moves into their area or they've moved. This is incredible and a validation of what's coming, you
Yeah.
know?
Thank you. And side note, my beautiful, almost 15-year-old dog is right next to me. So if you hear some different sounds, I'm pretty sure it's not my Arcturian guide. I'm pretty sure it's Sherri. So it should be okay.
I don't hear it, but that's okay. Who knows? Some people pick up things. So let's talk about I want to get into the books a little bit. And then I do want to talk about your near-death experiences as well. But these books, what was your inspiration for writing them? And I know it's fiction, but I feel like there's some truth to it as well. And so can we talk about that and then maybe give the audience a little bit of a brief uh synopsis of what the books are about, this trilogy actually, and what the whole, how to tie them all together.
Mhm. Yes, and please, excellent question. Forgive me. I hope to do this justice, because part of it, the third part, is still, I can see it, but it's still in the works. So it's kind of like in the immaterial at present. So the first book, Chronicles of an Arcturian Envoy, a Starseed's Journey into the Great Awakening. So this happened in real time. Um, I was writing a chapter a day while we were all getting in the community so much wonderful um, disclosure. Not only were these wonderful military whistleblowers sharing their information, but it was also being corroborated by a lot of other people as well. So I thought to myself, my gosh, how can this information reach more people? Not only is Elon Musk, literally talking about, like, Artemis Accords and stuff and Jupiter agreements, basically, if you really can hear behind or see behind what's being purported or reported on. But so many connections were being made. So I just thought to myself, well, of course, I didn't think to myself. My guides were like, you need to write a book. So what I did was I took kind of my real life story, or segments of it. For instance, in I lived in an animal sanctuary for like a month or two in Marshall, North Carolina, and it was quite an interesting situation. I have attracted many interesting situations in my life, many of which have ended up in books. So that whole situation where I had to drive up this gravel driveway. It's getting, it's approaching winter time. It's freezing. My tires are skidding, this and that. Um, Getting off of a particular street that sounded very similar to what's in the book and this and that. Envisioning the home, the house, the sanctuary, writing it in there, then taking certain aspects of people that I was in contact with at the time, little bits of a particular character, Mrs. Crisp, was two different people that I knew. So little things like that. I was a professor at a school in the mountains of North Carolina, and I would utilize my lecture material as fodder for the book. So each chapter was like a theme. You'd have chapters such as um, like spirituality, family, history, and we talk about the Andromedan perspective of our human history. Miracles, gratitude, and how we can tell stories but still discuss disclosure while doing so. So to succinctly answer your point right now, I had to find ways in which I could take fictional components and inject it with what I consider to be truth, and give it disseminate it in a manner that helps people really inculcate their being into the material without consciously being forced to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like your and I's styles are similar in that I think that in this disclosure process, whatever you want to call it right now, that we are going through as a collective, knowledge is essentially is a currency, and I've talked about that a lot in lectures and interviews, one-on-one with clients, and I think that that is really good, but it also is causing a lot of disarray amongst the masses because everybody wants to know the truth. And
Mm,
there are a lot of narratives being
mm,
pushed out. And many, I'm not just talking about one, there are many, whether it's in the physical, like now period with politics and medicine and whatever, education, you name it, or in the past. Where do we come from? How did we get here? Who did this to us? Who didn't do this to us? All of these things, right? And I think that although it is important, we really, and what I'm being told over and over again through my sessions with actually more children now than adults in their sessions, that we are missing the mark here, and
mm,
we're going around in circles, and what
mm.
we need to understand is that does it really matter, and how many versions are there, because we live in a multidimensional reality. So who's to say that there is one truth? There can be
Yeah,
many truths depending on which timeline you existed on. So
yeah,
there isn't one story that we're all going to agree on, because I
yeah.
think there are many versions. So it doesn't necessarily mean that this one group is wrong
Mhm.
and this one group is right. Perhaps they're both right, perhaps they're both wrong. Perhaps we all have elements of the truth, but no one has the full truth.
Yes.
And that is what they're trying to tell us, to really open our hearts, not our minds, but our hearts to that notion that we will be here hundreds of years from now if we still continue to debate
Mm,
certain topics. If we just recognize that there are many versions and we move forward and say, let's focus on the now version. How
mm,
about that? How can we make this reality better for the children? And what are these things? What are the things that we can do? And
yes.
I personally am focusing on the children and education. Other people are focusing on sanctuaries and animals. Other people are focusing on medicine and etc. There's a million different things. That is what we should be focusing. And that's what the children are telling me through these sessions. We're getting it wrong. And until we get it right, we are going to be stuck here.
Sherri, that is a perfect segue to my second book, but I have to say one thing. You're exactly right when it comes to truth. Notice before when I said those words, truth, I made sure not to say the truth,
Yeah.
because that is a whole different thing. But when I say truth, there's many truths, and there's different elements of truth in so many things. So I'm not going to reiterate what you said because you said it beautifully. But the second book is exactly, what does the main character do once he learns about all of this Great Awakening stuff, hashtag the Great Awakening. Um, and the Great Awakening was basically just starting sort of in the first book. The second book happens about 9 months later. And what are they doing with the knowledge that they gained? And how are these relationships being built? And how can we on Earth, Terra, whatever, how can we here do accomplish our missions that may be sort of perceived as something, otherworldly or too fantastical in our minds, but how can we do it on the ground? How can we create these beautiful centers? How can we touch the lives of children, teach them what we know and what we don't know, and have them teach us what they know and what they don't know, the questions and the answers and that whole give and take. So he creates a school in the second book, and very similar to what I'm learning about your beautiful school. And it was just crazy, the synchronicities that were going on, because as I was writing the book, I think we just started, like, we had a conversation over the phone. I'm like, sis, I'm on chapter 13, and like we're talking about, how the nonprofit aspect of it was started. And Robert says something really cool. I'll be doing an interview with him on New Year's Day. But he said something in a prior conversation about you basically gave people a blueprint in the second book to do this, to create these schools, and it's like, if you have the vision and the drive and the fortitude, and it's part of your mission, whether that is your Terran mission or your galactic mission, get or did. That's what I always say. So
I love this conversation, Dan. I think this is so much fun. It's a breath of fresh air to talk to somebody, and the vibe is high. Like we're smiling, it's happy.
Mm,
Not for this doom and gloom. And that's why I love that you have the second book, because it's like, okay, we've heard all the different varieties of truths,
mm,
and if we just marinate in it, we're just
mm.
creating this mixed stew, and it's hot and it's messy, like let's get out of it and co-create some new stuff. And I love that your book, the second book, talks about that. And it's, where do we go from here? And I love even more that as we spoke on the phone, because I just want I want to point out something. You hadn't finished, or you were just finishing with this second book when we had our conversation, and you had just seen me speak at the conference. So you were already working on your book. Over on my end, I'm already creating what I've been creating for a few years now. And it's like both of our heads are exploding, like, yes, like, and now we're connected, and we're going to collaborate. And I want to save that to the end, because I want to talk about our beautiful collaboration and what we're going to do together, because I believe that this is massive, what I'm doing and what you're doing and many are doing, and we have to work together. And there's a lot of moving parts to it, and I think you have a beautiful part to play.
Thank
And we're being brought together for a specific purpose. And I don't want to be in the drama anymore, and I want to surround myself with people who are like, let's do something, let's pull our sleeves back, and like, let's get to work. Because that's how I feel this. And I don't know about you, but I feel like no matter how much I do, and people constantly remind me in different ways, how do
you.
you do it, Sherri? How do you do it? And you and I talked about this before we went live here, or not live, but recorded. Like, we are our biggest critics. And I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, there's so much more I need to do. And I feel overwhelmed. Like, I have to get this done, and I have to get this. And sometimes we forget what we've already done. And we have to give ourselves a break and recognize what we've accomplished and all the things that we've done. And you and I are so similar. It's like we have the same blueprint, like we're very similar in our personalities. But I think you feel the same, where you feel like this overwhelming sense of, I have more to do. I have more to do. And I
Constantly.
love your books, Dan, because I feel like it's going to give people the opportunity to read something that is fiction, but it opens their eyes and inspires them on what could be. Because unfortunately, right now, I think a lot of this new earthy, great awakening stuff is being looked at as woo-woo still, unfortunately. And so we have to present things in a way where it's seemingly, oh, magical and what if. But in reality, if we can just put that suggestion in people's mind as opposed to the negative narrative, voila, we have a completely beautiful canvas of bright colors and high vibrations and endless possibilities, right?
You bring up a very good point, Sherry. So maybe it's just how my brain works. I don't know, but and maybe it's the 4 years of very intense doctoral training.
Sure.
Oh my God, don't get me started. I don't have any hair, and there's reasons, not just biology, but there is a lot in these books that oh goodness, I forgot what I was going to say. Darn it. The yes, oh, got it. The way in which we ground the information in this book, granted, it is fictional, right? But there is a lot of groundingness in it. So in the first book, it takes very high concepts, but puts it in a manner that's like, okay, so he's having communications with this extraterrestrial being, right? That I can kind of understand because it's fiction. But what he does with the material in the second book, he creates a school like with his loved one, and you see these beautiful children coming up, and you there are all these character developments, and there's these conflicts, and these characters come in and out, and more characters coming in, so it's almost as if you're seeing what can be and is occurring on earth right here right now. So there's this tangibility going on here in this fictional sense that really helps people ground themselves into what could and can and is happening. So
Is possible, yeah. And I love, all of us, anyone watching this can see that sometimes the road to where we are, let's say even right now in this now moment, is very holistic and bumpy, and you take different directions. I worked with animals for 20 years. I was a RVT, and I was never going to work with. I hated people. Now look at me now, like like wow, it's crazy. And I think that if we look at your journey in your coaching business and what you do to help people, is such a beautiful thing, because I think that navigating through all of this chaos right now, people genuinely need coaching. And I do a lot of coaching with my clients, and you have a beautiful program that you put together. And I'd like for you to talk to people about it, because I think you break it down month to month, and I think it's very tangible and not overwhelming for people, because it's always, all clients always ask me, where do I start?
Mhm.
People just, they need to get their one foot forward, and they need just a little bit of guidance. And then I work with my clients in my own method, or however you say it. But you have a beautiful program that you've established. Can you tell us about it?
Sure, it's called multi-viewing. It's my LLC, established in California, and I established it probably 14, maybe it was 2014, 2015, whichever one. And I just, well, I'll tell the truth, per usual. But just before it, I'm very much about authenticity. So if something comes in my brain and it's like truth, I just have to say it. Just before I established my company, I wanted to get to know my bio family better, and I wanted us to be able to communicate better. So I just sort of put a few different like personality tests, some astrology stuff, some numerology stuff, these little modalities that sort of help us frame the world in many different ways. And my Virgo moon popped in, so I had a little Excel spreadsheet. I did the similarities, the differences, the how certain things can affect the other things. So I was literally mapping my bio family in order to help us speak better to each other, and to recognize where we're all coming from, because I come from a family that just does not talk, about things that really matter and stuff. So that of course didn't jive very well, but it was really cool. So then I thought to myself, well, my guides keep telling me, or whoever's talking to me is telling me, like there's something bigger here. So I took that framework and I went with it, and I literally put a snow globe microphone, my keyboard, lit a candle, I slightly meditated, listened to some binaural beats, and I just wrote what I was being sort of guided to write. And it created a 5 month life coaching program. Each month is different, and then there's sort of sub themes by week. And so, for instance, the first month is health. And so we take sort of the elements and we break it down. So the first week is physical health. Second week is emotional health. You get a little bit deeper. Third week is mental health. And fourth week is spiritual health. So how can we see more of the holistic capacity in what we do? And I took people from all walks of life, and I did, one sort of one big laser coaching session a week. Everything was recorded so they could watch it and hear it at any point. I had meditative audio tracks where I would assist them in guided meditations. And it was a really cool thing. So the big old textbook, I think 220 pages. And there's links to it as well if you get the digital copy. It's available on vitalsource.com, and you could buy it or you could rent it. It's sort of a it all goes with the program itself. But it's a really cool thing. And then of course the second month we do love, and we start with self-love, and then we work into interpersonal love. And then I think the third is sort of like maybe a familial love. And then the last one is sort of agape love.
Mhm.
And we continue to branch out. We start with a small aspect of it and branch out. And I tell you, like after the second month, people are just, I mean, we go over, even in the first month, we go over all different types of wonderful things like, Ayurveda and alkaline diets to help people, with their physical issues. And it's a complete overhaul. I mean, we talk about things like astrology, numerology, and Myers-Briggs and all these different things. So that's been really helping a lot of people, and I've had a blast being able to see some people do two coaching programs and wanting an advanced course. So I have to
Yeah.
work on that pretty soon as well.
Oh, in all your free time, right?
Yeah.
I always joke. I always tell people when I'm doing classes, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do a part this, blah, blah, blah. In all my free time, everyone laughs, because, if we had more time, the time matrix, and I'm curious what you are
Mhm.
getting from your guides, because I talk about the time matrix a lot and how it's changing. And I'm just curious, I'm not gonna say anything else, but what are you getting on that whole notion?
Good question. And I did hear something, but I have to say something first before I say what they
Okay.
said. But you know how it goes. But in the first book, he literally the being, he laughs about time. He laughs about humans' concept of time, not of course in a negative way, but it's a jovial sort of thing, because we as the third density human perspective, we look at time like, oh my God, it's ticking away, this and that, where you know I can't make things work, all these crazy cerebral things that we tell ourselves. But honestly, there really is no time limitations and stuff over there. And it almost makes them laugh a little bit, because we put so much stress and pressure on ourselves to make
Mhm.
sure that everything is absolutely perfectly in line. Now, what I am kind of getting, if you don't mind me saying, and we haven't even talked about this, so let me know if it jives with you, that time is kind of speeding up a little bit. And it's accelerating with the higher vibratory waves of consciousness, kind of. Is that what you've been getting as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going so fast that like literally your head spins, because it's almost like our physical bodies are having a hard time keeping up with the time element. And what I'm being told by mostly children, but some adult sessions, is that we are being almost catapulted out of the time matrix. And
Mm.
in order to do that, we have to speed up time to allow our physical body to adjust to a higher frequency and therefore a higher density to pierce us out of this time matrix, because where we're going, there won't be any more time. And it will kind of be like it used to be in way before clocks and calendars and all of that, where we just went from the sun,
Mm.
and it was, sun up to sundown. And what we do in between that time frame is up to us. But also, I think sun up to sundown will change the duration of it. But I've
Mm.
also been told that we will sleep a lot less. And part of third density is our bodies need to be, I mean, think about it. If we live in it, I mean, sometimes you just got to think outside the box. If we truly have been in this control matrix, they need us to sleep a lot, so that they half the time we're like, in this state of in between, so that one, they can nefariously do things to get to us, because the veil is much thinner. But also, like, they got to keep us busy, because the more we are busy during the day, and we're working, 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 going to school, or vegging out in front of the television and being completely hypnotized, and you wonder why you get up and you feel so drained, like, why am I so tired? I was just laying there. It's happened to me on my lazy days. I'm like, oh, I want to binge watch a show, and I get off the couch after a couple of hours and I'm like, dude, I could barely walk. I'm like, "Whoa," because you're getting out of a hypnotic state. I'm a transpersonal, master transpersonal hypnotherapist. I know it all. And so I know that. So I put a timer on and I make myself, I'm like, that's it. You're not getting sucked in, but think about this notion of time. Like they have to fill it so that we are constantly we're being hypnotized in some way or programmed. Because if we were like the indigenous cultures and we just sat outside and looked at the stars and played music and talked to one another, we would reveal a lot more about us, and we would tap into this other side of us, the powerful side of us that they don't want us to know that we have, so they hide it from us and they keep us busy so we don't interact with it. But the children, they have it, and it's a beautiful, beautiful presence and light, and until it's dimmed. But not now. These children that are coming in, they will, and they're telling me they're warriors, and they're like, I will not be dimmed. And they are just inconceivable. Like there are no words to describe the children. Like sometimes my mouth is open when I'm talking to these children because the stuff that they say to me just blows my mind. I wish I could just get the parent permission to record it and like share it with the world, because it really would make people think,
Mm.
what they have to say. But um, gosh, I want to hear more about you, and I'll talk about our collaboration, but again, I want to leave it to the end. Let's talk about some of your near-death experiences, because I feel like, didn't you say you had more than one?
Well, so I, as a transpersonal scholar, I have to make sure I, use the right verbiage. But I'll say officially one near-death experience, but then also an out-of-body experience when I got hit by a car, which was absolutely crazy. And I'd love to talk about that if you
Yeah,
don't mind.
tell me, yeah.
So kind of in a nutshell, um, the near-death experience happened when I was about 5 years old, and it was sort of a recurring memory, sense memory, but I could also see it visually that I had for probably maybe 2.5 decades or so until I finally recognized what was going on. I'd say 2 to 3 decades, because at 35 I was in my doctoral program and I started researching what a near-death experience was, and I was like, that is exactly what I had when I was 5 years old. So I was diagnosed clinically. How do I just say? My heart stopped. It was clinically written in my paperwork twice. When I had cancer. So I had cancer when I was 4 years old, and I did chemotherapy for 2 years. I ran the gamut of surgeries and transfusions and bone marrow, spinal tap, all these really tough things as a youngster. And so there was one point when I was having a grand mal seizure. And so, like, the tip of my head and the bottom of my heels were the only things that were touching the ground. So I looked like an arc. And then all of a sudden, I saw I popped out of my body. I wasn't conscious of the popping out aspect, but I was conscious of looking at my body. And I knew it was my body because I could feel it. I was like, that's me. I could see the doctors, I could see the nurses, and I could feel, and I wasn't supposed to look at the being, but I could feel a being to my right. He was very, very tall, and he was kind of in like, I described it in one of my drafts in my Waiting for Life, the memoir, that he was in kind of a robe, but I don't want to say like a terry cloth robe. It wasn't like that, but it just sort of like felt like maybe something like that. It's hard to explain. But I could feel that and sense that. And I was very young and very small, and my gaze was towards what was going on, and I could feel here. I could feel hear him saying, you know, do you want to go back? Look at what you'd miss if you didn't. Um, and he was kind of like helping me see past, present, and future at the same time. But I was very young, so I couldn't quite intellectually understand all that. But I just sort of got drawn back into my body because it was like my emotion of excitement, or my emotion of like the possibilities of what could be, but also to a bit of a mission kind of situation, drew me back in my body. And the next conscious memory I have was me putting together a puzzle in my hospital bed and consciously waking up while I was putting together the puzzle. So that's the only next memory I had. So I don't know how much time happened before between all that, but that was just when my consciousness kind of kicked back into my memories. That was the near death experience. out of body experience
Well, hold on,
was,
hold on.
oh,
Let's unpack that one real quick. So,
okay.
do you believe th- that that being was a guide of yours, and why you didn't want to look at it?
Yeah, very good question. I don't know if I said this, but it was almost like I knew, or I was told, or I knew whatever, that if I looked at the being, I would want to go home. So I didn't mention that before. So that's what
I've
I
heard
knew.
that before. I
Yeah.
have heard that before. Gosh, that gives me goosebumps. I've heard that repeatedly, that especially with children, when they even when they're taken on board ships with their family members, their soul family for good reasons, not nefarious. Um, they they are that's partly why the memories were erased so that they don't recollect, so that they don't want to go home, because a lot of times, and I mean, I think everyone can empathize with that, especially when we have a good meditation or we have a good visitation from a warm feeling, like whether it's a family member or an angelic being or something. It's just like you get lost in it and you're like, I don't want to go back to that reality.
Mhm.
And I could totally relate to that.
Now, this is the cool thing. So, this segues really beautifully to the outer body experience because, long story short, I was in New York City. I was just finished teaching yoga, so I was very limber and relaxed. I just took one step off a curb because it was the light had just turned um, red, and the pedestrian sign was like a millisecond from turning on. As a good New Yorker, you look both ways and stuff, but then you sort of walk. This is how it is. Well, a taxi completely tried to beat the red light and definitely missed, but hit me. And I went through the whole out of body. I could see what was going on. Um, I felt no pain. Here's the crazy thing, and this I will say this till the day I die. I remember being picked up in the very tall, beautiful arms, slender but strong arms of someone, and I could feel a little bit of that material on my back and my head. And I was lifted up like I was a baby, like I was the most precious baby in the world. I was lifted up very slowly, that's how it felt to me, and I was placed on the ground as if I was being placed on my bottom, basically. But that is not what my physical body experienced. The physical body, um, the front of the taxi hit my left soleus muscle, my side of my calf. My lower back hit the window, smashed. Like apparently they said, I heard people talking that the front of that car is totaled, is what they said. Well, yeah, but I don't know because I didn't look back because they also told me don't turn around because
Yeah.
yeah, not good for the spine. But then I flew through the air and then my head scraped on the pavement for a very long time. But again, what I felt in the arms of this person who I know now and was the same person who was with me when I had my near death experience was just being picked up and gently placed on the ground. So,
Wow.
yeah, and I got up and I sat in the median in lotus position.
You did.
I was like, num num num, everything's fine. So weird. So weird.
It's so funny, but I guess in hindsight you can look back
Oh, you have to.
right, you have to. Yeah, people get so like, I don't know, they get so hurt by things, but sometimes you just gotta laugh. Like that's another thing that children say. The adults are too serious. We gotta laugh at ourselves. I laugh at myself all the time.
Raises your vibrations. Absolutely.
It does, it does. Oh my gosh. Wow, that's incredible. That is incredible. And I think a lot of people that have those experiences have remember seeing
Mm.
some sort of being with them. And a lot of people describe them as angelics, but depending on where we're from, a lot of these beings are galactics. But I think in our limited understanding and knowing, we just consciously go to angels all of the time.
That's very true. I don't mean, sorry, one thing. I remember telling the doctors in in the hospital, I was like, you guys don't understand what just happened. Like, someone picked me up. Someone
You're probably
picked
like, take this guy to psych ward, right?
Totally. Yeah. But anyway, sorry, go ahead. I apologize. Yeah.
No, it's so interesting. And so you have one main guide you mentioned, right? That in Arcturians is it a council or just one?
Yeah, good question. So many people ask, what's the name and this and that. When I was first tapping into my guides, it did feel kind of like a very busy room, and there was sort of like a communal sense. But after I've been able to really hone kind of what I do, because I first started utilizing his assistance while giving readings, because for me, my experience when I give mediumship readings and psychic readings, the place where I am, it's like there's no differentiation. It's like I have him there, I have my deceased loved ones, and I have other people. It's almost like it's on a similar realm, I guess you could say. That's at least just what it feels like to me. So yeah, I don't know the name or whatever, but I just know what he looks like, and I know his presence, and he can be very funny, and I just appreciate his. And I say his, and it's sort of like there's an ambisexual quality to it, where it's not too male, or it's a little slightly androgynous. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you bring that up too, because in my experience, anyways, with most of the Arcturian guides that I have worked with, say that they are androgynous and they don't really connect with a particular sex. And I've only encountered that, or not only, mostly encountered that with Arcturians versus others. And also, more with Arcturians than not, they don't use names. And a lot of times they say it's a vibration, it's a color, it's a sound, it's a clicking noise.
Mm.
Um, everybody has a soul signature. So essentially, in an energetic form, we all have our own name and with our energy, our frequency that is completely unique. And nobody else, similar to our thumbprint, something like that. So they use that. That's what they're like, that's my name. So we don't connect to names like you guys do here on Earth. And the ones that I do get names for tend to be those that have had connections to Earth before, where they've had other lives, or
Mm.
they've had very human-like experience, meaning like they were humanoid. So they had names so that because they spoke uh out loud, I guess, however you say that. So they needed a reference but most of them are telepathic. So what's the point of a name? They just connect telepathically, mind to mind, or energy to energy.
hmm You bring up a good point, per usual. So in the books, the being's name is Da'anael, and I've actually yet to meet someone who's able to pronounce it appropriately. Perhaps I should have put an apostrophe, but again, that's the Virgo moon in me. I have to pull that sucker back. But Da'anael is the name that came to me, and oddly enough, my name is Daniel. But I like when you were talking about frequency, because the frequency of the Anael feels much more in line with kind of my soul, rather than pronunciation of Daniel, right?
Mhm.
But I don't want to get anyone thinking that the being is me or whatever. But I'll talk about some of those interesting perspectives with Robert at a later date. But the Anael
Mhm.
is something that kind of is very and that stoppage, da ana l, is something that
Yeah.
really resonates with me.
Yeah. And I've had similar circumstances where I try to tell the person, the guide's giving me a name, but like I can't pronounce it. So like sometimes they'll simplify it with a letter or a color, things like that, but not everybody has names. And we have to be okay with that, because we truly aren't the center of the universe, although many, many ego driven humans, feel like they are. And you and I are certainly not like that. I can tell that you're not that way. And I think that we're perhaps here to kind of be the pioneers of, hey, look, this is another option for us. So back to Aramis. So Dr. Dan and I talked. I like to call you Dr. Dan. Um,
Score.
Dan and I talked, and we are going to collaborate in many ways, not just one. I feel like this is the beginning of a beautiful collaboration of many things. One of which is Dan and I are going to design, or Dan's going to design either a series or a program for children, utilizing elements of his adult program, but I think catering it more with the children. And we are going to present that next year, earlier in the year for the children through Aramis. And where that leads, who knows? But I'm excited about it. Nonetheless, there's a million directions we can go with that. So I'm really excited to bring you on board as one of our mentors, because I think that it could lead to so many different things, whether it's one-on-one, because a lot of these children are looking for somebody to talk to, and a lot of them just want to talk to me. And
Mm,
they just need, like, there was a beautiful, beautiful boy. I don't want to say his name because I don't have his mother's permission, but there was a young man that came to the conference, such a brave soul, to the conference that I went to in Orlando. And it was he's one of my clients, and his mom brought him so he could meet me in person. But of course, it's not just about me. He wanted to meet some of the other speakers, and he is so brave. And he went up and he talked and he asked questions. And he sent me a letter the other day, and he knows I love elephants, and he sent me an elephant puzzle with a little note, and he wrote me this beautiful note. And I just thought, God, this being, he's not even a child. Like,
mm,
this being is exceptional. And they just want someone to talk to that can hear them, that see
mm.
them, not
Yeah.
see the physical them, but beyond the physical, and really can relate to them, and understand and have a conversation about these things that they're interested in, that they can't talk to at school or even with their parents. And their parents are lovely, but they're like, Sherri, like, I'm open to this, but like, I don't know what to say. And I love your books, because I also am creating something called Jordan Media and Publications, named after my oldest son. And what my vision is in the long term is to create our own library where, and I don't take ownership of it, but perhaps we have all of Dan's books
Mm,
and all of my divinely guided children's books and other artists, and we collaborate and put a beautiful bouquet of animation, cartoons, films, documentaries, and books for children to read
yeah.
and families to read, that is for their highest good, not what's being presented on the television now. And I'm just so excited that we are connected. And so, is there anything that you want to add to what I said about your contribution to Aramis and our work together?
I will say, because I did not tell you this, but as you were talking, I remember having visions of doing something very similar like this. So I'll just say it's very interesting to be walking in this present moment as you're describing what you're envisioning me doing as well. So I'm like, this is just great. Yeah.
Well,
Synchronicity.
I think that this is the first conversation, like we talked about before we went on. It's a great introduction, and of you and I unified and coming together, along with some other amazing people that I have been just so incredibly, like, honored to meet, even in the last couple of months. And I think that as we blossom and we grow together, we'll just see where that goes, what that leads to, and we'll have to have another part two, so that we can go. I want to go more into your experiences, and I want to go more into what you feel comfortable sharing as far as what humanity needs to know. And we'll end it with that today, just one thing. But I want everyone to know that this is not the end of Dr. Dan and Sherri's collaboration. This is the beginning of something absolutely incredible and beautiful. And our vision is very aligned, and we're focusing on bettering this world, creating something beautiful for the children and future generations. And I'm just so excited to find someone else that really is sharing that vision with me. And I'm not saying that you and I are the only ones in the world. I'm just saying that I can collaborate with, right now and in this now moment. So, is there anything that you want to share with everybody before we go today, about like what's something important for people to kind of walk away from our conversation today, just in general, about anything we've spoken about?
Goodness me, no pressure, of course. I think you did a wonderful job explaining all of that. I think that the children are we as adults are working on so much unpacking of old paradigms, of the things that we were taught from our parents and those parents that were taught by their parents. And it almost feels as though we are the ones who are really charged with breaking that cycle right here, right now. And in order to really step into that presence and power, the the catalyst of all of that is going to be these young ones here right now who are have incarnated specifically to take on this new world. And we have can learn so much from these young people, and even simply being a presence and guiding them as best we can is really all that's necessary. So I love kind of how you're approaching your school, because it's remarkable to hear how you're communicating with the kids and stuff, and how you're allowing them to grow more into their environment and to take ownership and sovereignty. And a lot of that is in the book as well, this second book. So I look forward to hopefully getting onto the third book in about maybe 2 or 3 months. We'll see.
Oh, well, I
Mhm.
can't wait. I can't wait for that one and to read the first two and to see what you and I create together. So thank you so much, Dan, for joining me today. I will put all your links to your books on Amazon and anything else that you want me to share with everybody so that if they want to get a hold of you, they can. So I'll put that in the description below. And until next time, we'll speak hopefully maybe sometime in January. We'll have our part two. But until then, thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure to speak with you. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thanks, Sherry. Thanks,
Yeah.
y'all.
All right. Bye, everybody. Talk to you soon.